Today's episode is sponsored by my favorite productivity hack, a wonderful little product called Magic Mind. I'm taking a sip right now. All right, let's get started.
Project managers, have you ever felt like you should get that promotion or a better job? Start a business, write that book. Have you ever felt you were made for more but didn't know where to start?
Welcome to the PM for the Masses podcast with your host, Cesar Abeid.
Learn from the experts, think outside the box, have a voice, network, and be extraordinary.
PM for the Masses podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Cesar Abeid, your host, and this show is your regular reminder that your career matters more than your job and that your life is a project and you are the manager. Whether you work for a company or for yourself, your job stability is really just your ability to land your next gig. So join me in practicing intentional, planned, and value-adding relevance, starting right now. Well, my friends, my guest today is Antonio Nieto-Rodriguez, and he is the author of the Harvard Business Review Project Management Handbook, which is a fantastic book. I'm halfway through it right now. He has also written 5 other books and the HBR article, The Project Economy Has Arrived. His research and global impact on modern PM, or management in general, have been recognized by Thinkers 50. A pioneer and leading authority in teaching and advising executives in the art and science of strategy implementation and modern project management, Antonio is a visiting professor in 7 leading business schools and founder of Projects and Company and co-founder of the Strategy Implementation Institute and PM Motto. You can follow Antonio through his website, his LinkedIn newsletter called Lead Projects Successfully, and his online course, Project Management Reinvented for Non-Project Managers. Now, good afternoon, Antonio. How are you?
Good afternoon, Cesar. I'm good. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
It's so nice to have you. Are you in Spain?
I'm in Spain. I'm in Madrid. Yes.
Okay. ¿Eres español?
Soy español, sí.
Good. I speak a little bit.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, Portuguese is my first language, Brazilian Portuguese. But
okay,
as you know, we like to think we speak Spanish.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about the role of the Chief Project Officer, which is very, very exciting. And the first article that came up when I was looking for this topic was your article on the HBR website. So what inspired you to write about the emergence, I guess, of the Chief Project Officer role in organizations?
Well, there's different trends that inspired me, Cesar, to come with that article. One of them, a big one, is, of course, when you see how much resources are dedicated to operations in a business versus projects, the gap is increasing versus projects. Operations are getting more and more automated. In some industries, there's very few people in operations, right? And you still have a chief operating officer. That role was very, very popular when 80% of the business was run through operations, but in the future, that will be maybe 10, 20%. So we needed another role. And if the future of work is project related, then I thought we need somebody like a chief project officer, somebody that oversees all the project activities in an organization, is also accountable for delivering and delivering those projects, creating value. So that was one of the main ones. If operation shrinks, we don't need chief operating officer, but we need project officer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like we figured out operations, like with starting, I guess, with Toyota, back in the day, and we've been kind of perfecting that to the point that now it's like there is a whole industry around it, and with professionals and certifications and ways to look at how to streamline it and make it less, wasteful and things like that. But projects, I think, because it's always like a new thing, a new project by definition, right? It's something that hasn't been done before. Maybe it's harder to come up with ways to kind of streamline it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course, it's much harder to streamline. There's much more uncertainty. There's much more changes. So it's one of the challenges, right? Operations are great for automation, for standardized outputs, and one of the reasons why so many projects fail is because we've tried to operationalize project thinking that you will always get good results, and that's a mistake. Every project is different. Every project needs a different approach. We're moving into hybrid approaches rather than just one standard methodology. So indeed, it's exactly what you're saying, Cesar.
Yeah, and I think about this a lot, the difference between operations and projects, and sometimes it kind of gets a little blurry, and even the way people use the language, right? Like, oh, I have a project for you. Oh, like we need to streamline our operations, and but these words have meanings, right? And sometimes I find that some projects are very long, but so in the middle, right, between the starting and ending it, the management of that part could become operations. Like, for example, the life cycle of a vehicle, right? Like let's say there is a new VW Golf, right? That there's the design and all that, and then production, and then the phasing out for the new model. So that could take 5 years, 10 years sometimes. I guess it could be considered a project, but in between, you have to manufacture it, and that kind of brings in operations, right? So do you find that it's helpful to draw like a hard line between operations and projects, and how can we do that best?
That's a great question. I think there's no simple answer to that, Cesar. I think there's some parts of a project that could be operationalized, and some others that operations that could be handled as projects. And I think that's where the complexity lies. Trying to put fixed rules to all this is just very complex. For me, everything that's related to important changes, whether it's operations or projects, it's something that you work with project approaches, project management concepts, things that you need to do, and you want to automate, you want to standardize. That's where you go into the operations. And for me, every big ticket, for example, take a digital transformation project or program. In that program, you will see pieces that are more about innovation. Some other pieces of that program will be around lean startup. Some others will be more agile development if you're developing an app. Some others will need waterfall approaches to have a long-term planning, for example. And some pieces might be able to be done with Lean Six Sigma. You don't need to have a project. So I think in every big transformation, you have a mix, and some pieces will be operationals that you don't need to oversee as a project manager. It's an interesting topic.
Right. It's like that, the art of improving and or making things run better, but also managing change, right? And I guess every time there is a change that is required, it becomes a project, even if it's related to the operations. Okay, so you mentioned earlier the chief operating officer, right? So can you elaborate on the specific responsibilities of a chief project officer and how they differ from those of traditional C-level executives, like the COO, for example?
Well, I think the chief project officer is somebody that drives the implementation of the company strategy. It's someone that is also one of the biggest, I think, pitfalls in project management is that we say that the project manager is not accountable of the benefits of the project, right? That's the sponsor, that's the client or whoever, but not the project manager. The project manager needs to deliver on time, on budget, on scope. Whether you make any money, that's not your problem. And I think the chief project officer, it's a role that it's accountable for driving value creation. If you have a business where 80% of the projects are, 80% of the people are working in projects, that chief project officer needs to be at least 80% of the revenues, not just deliverables and Gantt charts, but value creation, right? So it's really, I think when you look at C-level people, this is often what they do, is they're accountable for revenues. and not just deliverables and other type of KPIs. So that's, I think, the big difference with a PMO, for example, a project management office. It's mostly about reporting and standards. No, chief project officer drives drives and grows the revenue, the bottom line, the top line. The difference with other roles is that the role of the chief project officer requires a lot of uh, kind of cross-departmental work, right? Is the projects, at least the most important, they always need resources from different departments, from different business units. And that's where you find always a lot of challenges where people don't want to share resources. So it plays a role to encourage cross collaboration within the business at the top level of the organization, but also at lowest level. That's for me one of the bigger challenges. We call it orchestrator, right? You have all these different leaders, and you need to make them work together, which is the other big challenge. So these are, for me, two big challenges that a chief project officer will do. The last one I want to highlight, it's also the chief project officer is the one that needs to facilitate a discussion at the C level on what are the top priorities of the business, what are the top strategic initiatives. So also trying to focus the people, try to come up with a common view, a portfolio view of the priorities is also another of the bigger challenges where, they play a different role than other C-level people.
Mm-hmm. As I was thinking about this leading up to today, to our conversation, I thought of the role of the CEO and how, their role is to execute. And this starting to sound a little bit like that. So where do you draw the line? That what you described could be also part of the CEO's role, like to work across silos and be accountable for deliverables and revenue. So what's the difference there?
It's true that there's a bit of overlap, and I think the CEO for me is somebody that should spend more time in project activity. Actually, I'm just starting a new book for HBR, and I'm trying to focus on only CEOs. What's their view? How do they see projects? How do they get involved? How much time they spend on projects? And based on the research I've done, they don't spend a lot of time in project activity. So I think the CEO has to be actively involved in the project, but also make sure that the business runs, the operations keeps focusing. So I think that the role of the CEO is different in the point that they need to also ensure that the running the business or the business as usually don't fall apart, right? That they keep improving, that they keep excelling on that piece. The other big role for me as CEO is always one of the most important external faces of the company. So I think they need to be more talking to customers, talking to shareholders, talking to communities, and that's not a role for the chief project officer. Chief project officer is mostly internal.
Great. Now, you discussed the importance of the hierarchy of purpose in project selection and prioritization, right? So can you explain this concept and the practical applications of it?
Sure. So this is around selection of projects. I think I just launched a tool, and I'll put an article in LinkedIn, but the selection of projects in organization is maybe a 50 years old process. There has not been many changes in 50 years on how companies select and prioritize the projects that they're going to be doing, which is crazy, right? And the technology has not evolved either too much. If we do a business case, we might have an Excel where you put all the projects, maybe a PPM tool, but not very smart. So, and one of the challenges that I'm trying to address in this article around purpose and prioritization is that most of these concepts, like the Eisenhower matrix or how do you select projects, were developed for selecting, maybe you have 5 projects or 10 projects, and let's run them through this mill, and the tool will tell you these are your top projects. But this is no longer valid, because companies that are working in any middle-sized company, large, they have hundreds of projects, thousands of projects. So you cannot apply these old methods into a portfolio which has exponentially grown in the past year. So I thought, what is a simpler, more productive way to do this? And instead of starting with strategy, which is what most of we do all the time, purpose will have a bigger meaning, because purpose is a key factor in order to create engagement, for example. So instead of just starting on the strategy, which will over time change, as opposed to purpose, which is a bit more stable, use the purpose to define your priorities in your projects. Use it as a criteria for screening projects. Then the purpose you follow with priorities. What are your top 3, top 5 priorities? Is it customer centric? Is it quality? Is it innovation? And then that will help you also to filter and to get to a way to decide, well, this project doesn't fit with our priorities, not with our purpose, then we don't do it. We don't discuss it further. So there's more details about that, but I wanted to flip and have something a bit more stable as a purpose, rather than the strategy, which changes a lot, as the core driver for project selection. Mm-hmm. And people like it. People has been using that, and so far, good feedback.
That's good. Yeah, because like you said, the strategy changes. Purpose tends to, like a company I work for, we have a company creed that, supposedly will never change. And that's kind of could be guiding us, in selecting projects based on that, like as a purpose. The other thing I find is that sometimes the justification for a project, folks are really good at drawing that line between what they're doing and the current strategy, but if that project is alone, right, in that line that takes you up to the strategy level, but you don't have other projects supporting that same line, then you may not achieve anything that's meaningful towards that strategy. But but you can still justify its existence. So when we look at a project and we break it down, like with the WBS, for example, we always try to make sure that each deliverable, the sub deliverables, add up to the deliverable, right? But we tend to not do that with projects, and why not? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right, so let's talk about the professional, him or herself, right? So what traits and skills do you believe are essential for an effective chief project officer?
I think the traits are, it's having, one of them, the most important for me, is having an executive mindset. So you see the people at the C-suite, they have a different mindset than most people, right? They take ownership of the organization. They feel like the company belongs to them to a certain extent. They would fight and spend the time needed to get through the difficult moments. They will focus on value creation. They will talk to whoever they need to talk to make it happen. And that's something that, unfortunately, project managers have not been asked to be done. Again, back to the point, just deliver on time, on budget, and on scope. So I think the chief project officer needs to have that executive mindset. I think this, if we look at project managers today, this is one of the core areas where they need to develop, is having that executive mindset. Let me give you just a quick example. Cesar, imagine you're leading a transformation around sustainability, for example, and one of the targets is to reduce the use or eliminate the use of plastic in your packaging by 2030. If you are the project leader of that initiative, the executive mindset will say, okay, I can deliver this by 2030, but I'm going to go to the CEO of this company or the boss and say, listen, if you give me that, and that, I can deliver this goal by 2026. We don't need to wait until 2030. So that's an executive mindset who thinks about benefits and how can you accelerate? What do you need to make them faster, right? So that's the chief project officer main characteristic, is an executive mindset. Others are what we talk already, an orchestrator, right? We need to find a way to work transversally as a team. That is not easy, finding that alignment, making sure that we prioritize things that matter for the organization rather than what matters to your department, to your KPI. So that's a difficult one. The chief project officer is this orchestrator to find the right balance, the alignment. I think that's something that we do at a smaller scale in our projects. This is at the organizational level, and that is massive. I think another skill is being able to zoom in. So that's why I think the track of project management is important, is what's wrong in this project? How can we save it? How can we accelerate? So being able to dive into the details, looking at the WBS or the critical path, and helping the team take decisions to just bring the project back on track, it's another core skill for the chief project officer. And the last, maybe it's also around innovation. So ideas have to come also from that person, and could be a use of AI, for example, but any other thing. So the innovation doesn't come only from R&D or the innovation team, but that person also has seen a lot, should be able to participate in the innovation process.
Right. And it's not easy, to develop these abilities, to be an orchestrator or to be able to zoom in and innovate. Requires not only skill, but also the ability to focus. And that's why I like to talk about Magic Mind, which is something that I've been using to help me focus. And as I've shared here before in the podcast, I struggled in the past with focus and being able to, especially in the mid-afternoon, call that mid-afternoon slump. And you know the drill, reaching for that third cup of coffee just to crash like an hour later. So I needed something sustainable to keep me sharp without the jitters of coffee. And that's when I stumbled upon Magic Mind. And Magic Mind is this little shot that's green. It's kind of weird. It's packed with ingredients that not only boosts energy, but also enhances focus and creativity. It's full of nootropics and adaptogens like lion's mane mushrooms, and which are great for cognitive function, and rhodiola rosea, which helps fight fatigue, for example. And it sounds too good to be true. And I was skeptical at first, but after trying it for a few days, I noticed that I wasn't just more alert, but also more relaxed and focused on my work. And the days that I don't take it, sometimes it gets to that afternoon slump and I'm like, you know what, I need to kind of be able to focus here. And I can sense that that inability to focus coming. And I say, okay, I'm going to go try some Magic Mind today. And what I love about it, like I said, it's easy to incorporate into my daily routine. Sometimes I'll take a shot in the morning. If I don't do it, sometimes it'll be in the afternoon. And if I do it in the morning, I'm set for the day. And it's way easier on my stomach than all the coffee that I used to drink. And I actually like the way it tastes. It's an acquired taste, but I like it now. And what are the results? I get it's less stress, better focus, and I just feel more upbeat throughout the day. Help me tackle big projects with a clearer head and maintain my energy levels. So if you're like me and you're looking for a way to enhance your day-to-day productivity and mental clarity, I highly recommend giving Magic Mind a shot. And here's something cool for you to take advantage of. If you go to magicmind.com/PMP, you can use my code PMP to get 56% off your first subscription and 20% off a one-time purchase. And this special offer is only valid for the next 10 days, so don't miss out. Remember, it's magicmind.com/PMP and use the code PMP at checkout for the discount. Now, Antonio, we talked about how practitioners can better prepare to be to grow into this role. Do you have an example of a company that successfully integrated the CPO role and the outcomes of this integration?
I wrote in the article a couple of examples. They don't call it CPOs, but for example, Heineken had a lady who was, they were kind of empowering the transformation person to a chief transformation officer role. And also not just in charge of the transformation, but they call them revenue uh, uh, ownership. So they add in the revenue component too. So there's a couple of examples that I found about this role more around the chief transformation officer, but expanded version. And I think that's maybe the way it's going to move forward, that companies are launching transformation with the idea that they're temporary. When the transformation is done, when you finish your digital transformation, you're done. And then you close the transformation office. What has happened in the last year is that companies realize that the transformation office is just growing and they never close, but they get more people and that person grows into the C level. So there are several luxury companies I'm working with. Heineken, I mentioned, there's some of these technology companies that are moving the chief transformation officer into that C-suite and plays this role. They're focused mostly on transformation. There's many projects that are not transformation. So I think that would be probably the next step, the next evolution, where these people are asked also to embrace and support all the other more operational projects and so on. So there's a few examples that people can read in the HBR article.
Okay. And I'll have a link to it on the show notes for this episode.
Yeah, I'll send you that.
Okay, great. Now, for the project management practitioner who's listening right now, who would like to maybe grow into this role, do you have any advice for them?
I think it's what we've been talking so far. It's Cesar, is that focus on benefits. I think we have been focusing on the triple constraint for 50 years, which is important. I don't say your project should be deliver on later or miss deadlines or over budget, but that the main reason why we do projects is for benefits, not for time and scope and budget. So understanding the importance of benefits, having a benefit plan for your projects, when are we going to deliver that benefit, and over time, it's something that we have not been trained to talk. Really, when you talk about project managers, they're happy to talk about WBS milestones, but I never seen a project manager talking about benefits and focusing the discussion on benefits and how to accelerate it. So I think that's an important step to take, and it's possible to develop. That's the good news. And I have a few LinkedIn learning courses that talk about that and articles, how to focus on benefits. Also, I think an important piece for us to learn is that we need to change the way we talk about projects with our stakeholders. They see project management as something very technical, and people don't want to get involved about the details that we do. So learning to talk the language of your stakeholders is super important, right? So if you talk to marketing, talk about what they matter. It's net promoter scores, it's new channels. Don't talk about your project because that's something that pushes people off. So understanding the benefits, adapting your language, becoming more strategic in how you see your projects fit in with the purpose and your strategy in your organization will just propel you, I think, in your career. This is where people I've seen accelerating their career and reaching higher goals. So it's not so much about the technical stuff. It's not so much about making the perfect project plan. And because nowadays we're seeing more and more AI come into space, it's more the soft skills, the business mindset, the stakeholder engagement, the leadership of your team that will help you in your career, understand how AI will help you. This is, I think, where we need to focus. And if you focus on that, I'm sure you'll have a very successful career.
Fantastic. Now, what about organizations? What advice would you give to organizations that are currently considering whether to introduce this CPO role?
Well, I think it's an urgent thing. I have put a few questions in the survey in the HBR article to say whether you need a CPO or not. And there's some points around the number of projects, the number of transformations. Is there somebody accountable, overseeing everything? If you answer that you're not, you don't have someone, and so it's really urgent to have that central point who will act as an orchestrator for the whole organization. So are you in control of your projects? Do you know how many projects you have? Do you know which are the most priority ones? Do you have an overview on the progress? Do you know the benefits that they will deliver? If the answer is no, then definitely you need urgently a chief project officer. It's being in control of your change and project activities.
Fantastic. Antonio, thank you so much for your time today. If people want to learn more about you and what you do, where should they go?
My website, you'll find a lot, antonionieto-rodriguez.com. So there you'll find a lot of stuff to freely download. And then I'm very active in LinkedIn. So just connect or follow me. And the newsletter also goes through 30-something thousand people. So I just talk about everything and comment. And so LinkedIn is I'm very active, and I like to hear from other people. So that's the two main sources, LinkedIn and my website. Cesar.
Amazing. Antonio, thank you so much for your time. I'm really enjoying your book and your articles, and I really appreciate you coming onto the show and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Great questions. And thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you for listening to the PM for the Masses podcast.
Tune in next week for more great ideas on how to manage your projects better and truly stand out in your industry.
PMforthemasses.com